Danielle thought her dream had finally come true. 2 beautiful sons, safe in her arms. But just 10 days later, one small discovery would shatter everything she believed about family, love, and fate. Danielle had dreamed about becoming a mother her whole life. She pictured it so many times, holding a tiny baby in her arms, whispering promises of love. But real life didn't make it easy. After 3 long years of trying, 2 heartbreaking miscarriages, and even 1 emergency surgery, Danielle had started to lose hope. Then one day, in a small ultrasound room filled with soft beeping and the faint scent of sanitizer, everything changed. She lay nervously on the table, holding her husband's hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. The technician moved the cold wand across her belly, squinting at the screen. There was a long pause, and then the words Danielle would never forget. 2 heartbeats, the technician said with a gentle smile. Looks like double the love. Danielle gasped. Tears welled up in her eyes. Her husband squeezed her hand harder and let out a shaky laugh. Even the technician smiled warmly. In that moment, the past 3 years of pain and disappointment faded into nothing. All Danielle could think was, this was a divine reward. A miracle meant just for her. Her pregnancy wasn't easy, far from it. There was constant nausea, long days on bed rest, sleepless nights filled with worry. But Danielle bore it all with a quiet kind of strength, because every kick, every flutter inside her belly reminded her it would all be worth it. Finally, the day came. After hours of labor, she held her sons in her arms for the very first time. 2 tiny boys, both with smooth, dark skin, tight little curls, and matching soft cries that melted her heart. The hospital had labeled them Baby A and Baby B. It didn't matter to her who came first. In her eyes, they were both perfect. She whispered the names she had chosen long ago, names filled with hope and meaning. Malik and Micah. Those first few days in the hospital passed in a warm, sleepy blur. Nurses came and went. Visitors arrived with balloons and flowers. Her husband snapped pictures, beaming with pride. Danielle fed them, changed them, kissed their tiny foreheads. She felt like her heart might burst from happiness. One nurse even remarked how rare it was that both boys were so calm. She said most newborns screamed during blood draws, but not these 2. They barely made a sound. Danielle laughed and said, I guess they're just used to being close. It seemed so perfect. Almost too perfect. But by day 6, little things began to trouble her. At first, she brushed them off. Micah, or the baby she thought was Micah, seemed more alert. He stared longer at faces. He reacted more strongly to sounds. Malik was quieter, too quiet. Danielle told herself it was just their personalities. Twins could be different after all. Still, there were odd moments. One diaper had no hospital label, while the other did. One baby had a small birthmark under his armpit. A birthmark Danielle was almost sure she hadn't seen before. And then there was the hesitation. One evening, she casually asked a nurse to confirm which baby was which. The nurse smiled, walked over to check the wristbands, and paused. Just for a second. But it was enough. That second stuck to Danielle's heart like a thorn. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Not yet, not fully. But the first seeds of fear had been planted, and they would soon grow into something Danielle never could have imagined. It happened late at night, when the whole world seemed half asleep. Danielle sat in a rocking chair by the window, cradling one of the babies against her chest. She was tired beyond words, her head nodding, her arms aching. But still, she rocked, humming a soft lullaby into the darkness. Her husband was asleep on the cot nearby, breathing slow and steady. The night nurse entered quietly, holding a clipboard. She gave Danielle a warm smile. "Just here to check their vitals." Danielle nodded, but something inside her stirred. A whisper she couldn't ignore. She tried to sound casual as she spoke. "Do you mind confirming the ID tags again?" The nurse smiled politely. "Of course." She walked to the bassinet and gently lifted one tiny wrist to scan the band. Danielle watched her face closely, and that's when she saw it. Not panic, not confusion, but a pause. A blank, silent pause that lasted just a second too long. Danielle's heart started pounding in her chest, hard, loud. She shifted the baby in her arms and whispered, her voice trembling. "What is it?" The nurse blinked, then forced a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I just need to double-check something." She turned and hurried out of the room, clipboard in hand. Without another word, the door clicked shut. And then, silence. Danielle sat frozen in the chair, arms locked tightly around the baby. The rocking stopped. Time stopped. Her breathing felt too loud in her ears. Minutes dragged by. 5 minutes. 10. 30. Her husband stirred awake, rubbing his eyes. "Everything okay?" he mumbled. Danielle didn't answer. She couldn't. Her mouth felt like it was sewn shut by fear. Then, the door opened again. 2 nurses entered first. Then a woman in scrubs with a laminated badge around her neck that read, "Admin." Behind her, a hospital security officer stood silent and watchful. Danielle's body tensed. Every instinct screamed at her. Something was wrong. The woman with the admin badge stepped forward, her voice soft, careful. "Mrs. Akers, we need to speak with you privately." Danielle's husband sat up straight in the cot. "What's going on?" The woman hesitated. Danielle saw it, the way she searched for words that wouldn't shatter them. "There seems to have been an administrative mistake regarding your twins' identification." Danielle clutched the baby tighter. Her husband's voice sharpened. "What kind of mistake?" The administrator took a slow breath. "One of the babies. The ID number on his wristband doesn't match your delivery records." For a moment, everything inside Danielle went numb. She whispered the only words she could find. "What are you saying?" The woman's next words sliced through the air like a knife. "We believe that during the NICU transition, on the night of your delivery, there was a mix-up between 2 newborn boys, born just 20 minutes apart. We believe you gave birth to 1 child." Danielle's vision blurred. Her knees buckled. She almost dropped the baby. Her husband rushed to steady her, his own face as pale as the hospital sheets. He choked out the question neither of them wanted to ask. "Are you saying one of our sons isn't ours?" The admin woman gave a small, solemn nod. "We're running emergency DNA tests now. But yes, it appears only 1 child is biologically yours." Danielle's arms tightened protectively around the tiny boy she held. She could feel the rapid beat of his little heart against hers. Then, in a voice so small it was almost a prayer, she whispered, "Then, who is the other?" The admin lowered her gaze. "We don't know yet." The room grew painfully silent. Only the distant beep of a monitor somewhere down the hall broke the stillness. Danielle's world, once filled with light and music and newborn cries, had tilted into a darkness she never could have imagined. And the true heartbreak was only just beginning. Danielle didn't sleep that night. She sat in the chair, the baby pressed close to her chest, her husband silent by her side. Every few minutes, footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Every time, Danielle's heart jumped, hoping, dreading. But no one came. Hours dragged on, slow and cruel. Finally, just after dawn, the door opened. A nurse entered, her expression somber, holding a sealed envelope in her hands. Behind her stood the hospital's pediatric chief, a man Danielle had only seen in passing before. He cleared his throat gently. "There's been a confirmed mix-up," he said, his voice kind but heavy. "The child in your care, one of them, is not biologically yours." The words hit like a physical blow. Danielle stared at the two babies in her arms. Micah, her biological son, squirmed slightly in sleep, stretching a tiny fist. Malik, the boy she thought was his twin, lay still, one small hand wrapped tightly around the fabric of her shirt, like he never wanted to let go. Her heart broke into 1,000 pieces. How could she possibly tell them apart now? How could she even begin to understand which moments belonged to which baby? To her, they both felt like hers. The next morning, more answers came, but with them came even more heartbreak. The hospital administrator returned, this time with a caseworker and the head NICU nurse. They stood at the foot of her bed, their faces grim. Another baby had been born the same night as Danielle's delivery. Same floor, same hour. But this mother was different. She had checked in under a false name. She had minimal identification. She gave birth, declined to nurse, and refused to stay overnight. Danielle's husband leaned forward, his voice low. "What are you saying? Did she abandon him?" There was a long, painful pause. The caseworker nodded slowly. Yes, security cameras confirmed she left through the stairwell at 4:37 a.m., without notifying anyone, without signing any discharge papers. Danielle's stomach twisted. The abandoned baby, Baby Doe, they called him, had been left in the NICU. Somehow, during the late-night chaos of the nursery shift, when nurses were moving babies between stations, Baby Doe had been bundled up in standard hospital clothes, mislabeled, and placed in Danielle's recovery suite right alongside her son. Nobody questioned it. The babies were tiny. They both had dark skin, soft curls. They cried in the same small, trembling way. To tired eyes and tired hearts, they looked almost identical. Danielle felt a deep ache rise inside her chest. They offered her options. Cold, heavy words, wrapped in legal terms she barely understood. The caseworker spoke gently. "We can initiate a safe handoff of Baby Doe to the state foster system. He'll be placed into care until a biological family member comes forward, or he's adopted." The room tilted sideways. Danielle clutched Malik tighter, her tears hot and blinding. Malik, the baby she had fed at 3 a.m., the baby she had soothed through hiccups and gas pains, the baby who had curled into her chest as if he already knew. She was home. Her voice came out small but steady. "No," she said. The caseworker straightened slightly. "You have the right to apply for temporary guardianship," she said. "But the process can be complicated. It can take time." "I don't care how long it takes," Danielle interrupted, her voice stronger now. "I won't let him go. Not to strangers, not to the system, not after everything." The hospital allowed them to stay for 2 more nights while arrangements were made. Danielle barely left the room. She bathed both boys herself, memorized their every breath, every small movement. When staff offered to help, she politely declined. These were her sons, both of them, blood or not. On the 3rd night, her husband sat beside her in the dark, watching the babies sleep. "You know, we weren't even ready for one," he said softly, "let alone 2. Danielle turned toward him, searching his face. "You don't want him?" she whispered. He reached out, brushing Malik's tiny cheek with a single fingertip. "I didn't say that," he said quietly. I don't know where he came from. I don't know what he's been through. But I know one thing for sure." He looked into Danielle's eyes, steady and true. "He found you. And that, somehow, made all the difference." 1 week later, Danielle sat in a small office across from a judge, a caseworker, and 2 lawyers she had never met before. Her hands trembled slightly as she signed the paperwork. Emergency guardianship of baby Doe. Malik, her son. At least in all the ways that mattered most. She clutched him in her arms as she pressed the pen to the paper, feeling the small, steady rhythm of his breathing against her chest. He slept peacefully, completely unaware of the storm raging around him. And maybe that was a blessing. The transition wasn't easy, not even close. There were interviews, home evaluations, endless forms that asked the same cold questions again and again. Danielle answered every one of them. She showed up to every meeting, often with Micah on one hip and Malik on the other. Sometimes the caseworkers would glance at the babies, almost confused by how easily they both clung to her, as if they'd always known she was their mother. One agent asked bluntly, almost without emotion, "Why do you want to adopt a child that isn't biologically yours?" Danielle didn't flinch. She looked down at Malik, who was gnawing happily on the strap of her bag, and smiled softly. "Because biology didn't feed him at 3 a.m., she said. "I did." She smoothed Malik's soft curls with her palm. "Because biology didn't calm him during his first fever." She glanced up, her eyes shining. "I did." She paused, her voice thick with emotion, "because when he opened his eyes, he looked for me." The room fell silent after that. No one had anything else to say. Weeks stretched into months. Danielle and her husband completed every requirement, every inspection, every exhausting bit of paperwork. They were determined, even on the days when it felt like the system was made to break hearts. At home, life found a new rhythm. Micah grew strong and curious, reaching for every toy with wide, wondering eyes. Malik stayed quieter, more watchful. But every time Danielle sang, he would smile, a shy, sleepy smile that made her heart melt. Neighbors would visit and coo over the twins, never knowing the full story. Sometimes, friends would pull Danielle aside and whisper the questions they were too polite to ask in public. "Do you ever think about it?" they would say. "How different your life would be if the hospital hadn't made that mistake?" Danielle would just smile, hold both her boys close, and shake her head. She didn't think about what was supposed to happen. She thought about what had happened. She thought about how, sometimes, life doesn't care about the plans you make. It doesn't care about biology or paperwork or the odds stacked against you. Sometimes, life just places a child in your arms, not by birth, but by something greater, by a divine accident. And in those moments, you don't argue, you don't question, you just love. That was the promise Danielle made every time she rocked Malik to sleep, every time she kissed his forehead, every time he cried, and she was there. Not by blood, but by choice, by love, the kind that doesn't check names on a hospital bracelet, or read DNA reports, or need anyone's permission. It was the kind of love that made a family real, and Danielle knew she would never let him go. 6 months later, the courtroom was full of soft murmurs and the smell of polished wood. Danielle sat on a long bench, dressed in her best blouse, holding Malik close against her heart. Micah sat in a car seat nearby, babbling happily at the ceiling lights. Her husband squeezed her hand, giving her a small, steady smile. The judge entered, A kind-eyed woman with silver hair pulled into a neat bun. She took her seat, glanced through the thick folder on her desk, and then looked over her glasses at Danielle and her husband. "Is this the petition to finalize the adoption of Malik James Akers?" Danielle's throat tightened. She nodded. The judge smiled gently. "Well, I see no reason to delay." She tapped her pen lightly on the desk. "By the power vested in me, I hereby grant full legal custody and adoption of Malik James Akers to Danielle and her husband." The words barely finished before tears filled Danielle's eyes. It was done. It was official. Malik was hers, not just in her heart, but in the eyes of the world. She pressed her lips to the top of Malik's soft hair and whispered, "You're home, baby. Forever." The courtroom clerk snapped a photo for the records, Danielle and her husband smiling through tears, Micah clapping his tiny hands, Malik yawning sleepily in her arms. It wasn't the photo she once imagined. It wasn't the family portrait she had pictured all those years ago. It was better. It was real. Word spread quickly among friends and neighbors. Some sent cards. Others dropped off casseroles and balloons. And almost everyone, in hushed voices, asked the same question. "Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if the mix-up never happened?" Danielle always gave the same answer. She would look down at her two boys, brown-eyed, bright, beautiful, and pull them close. "I don't think about what was supposed to happen," she said. "I thank God every day for what did happen." Because life doesn't always follow your carefully drawn plans. It doesn't always ask permission before changing everything. Sometimes, life crashes into you when you least expect it, handing you a different path, a harder path. Sometimes, it places a child in your arms by mistake. And sometimes, that mistake is the greatest gift you could ever imagine. Danielle learned something through all the tears, all the heartache, all the uncertainty. You don't choose family by blood. You choose it by love. And love never looks at DNA. Love doesn't care what a hospital bracelet says. Love knows the sound of a baby's first laugh, the warmth of a small hand clutching yours at night, the deep, unshakable feeling that you were meant to find each other all along. Today, if you drive past Danielle's house, you might hear the sounds of two boys racing toy trucks across the porch, shouting and laughing as only brothers can. Not brothers by blood. Brothers by something much stronger, by a love that started with a hospital's mistake and ended with a miracle. Because sometimes the best families are the ones you never saw coming.